And welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around, I've got a whole bunch of obscure 1960s movies which have just been released by Imprint. They're really deep cuts and they're wide-ranging in their genre. And there's also a box set of a cult TV series from the 1960s, which a lot of people, including myself, really remember fondly. So let's get started with the movies. I'm going to do the movie I like most last before I do the TV series, but let's get going. This one's an obscure piece of Sean Connery's work from the era when he was hitting big as James Bond. He'd made a couple of Bond films. In fact, I think it may have been 3 before he made this one. And then he made a little film called Woman of Straw with Sean Connery, Gina Lollobrigida, Ralph Richardson, and pretty much nobody else you need to know about. It was directed by Basil Dearden, and it's a slightly old-fashioned English crime drama about a crotchety old racist millionaire whose nephew, played by Sean Connery, the millionaire is played by Ralph Richardson, wants his money. And he cooks up a scheme with a beautiful Italian nurse so that she can marry the old guy, inherit the money, and give him some of the money when inevitably the invalid old guy dies. It's a really interesting combination of Bond Sean Connery and the path later taken in Sean Connery's career, where he's using all of the charisma and all of the tricks of playing an aristocratic guy that he had from the Bond films, but playing a very different and much, much more misogynistic character in this one. This is Imprint number 348. There's one of the lots of cover art. There's the cover art that's not on the slipcover. But of course we have extras. We have an facsimile of the exhibitor's campaign book, which was the book that was given out to cinemas that were going to show this movie, telling them a lot of information about it and how they could get various things like lobby cards and stuff like that to promote the film, and cross promotions they could do with other things. There's all your choices of ads that the cinemas could put in their local newspapers, for instance. A lot of information there. There's a bit of Connery, and there's pretty much all the information anybody in the local newspapers would need to put up a promotion for this film. It's nice that they can add those things when they can find them, because they are quite rare to find, and having the facsimile edition really works. There's a bit of Connery and Gina Lollobrigida as the nurse, the disc itself, and the extras are pretty good as well. It's in 1080p high def, audio commentary by film historians Lee Pfeiffer, Tony Latino, and Paul Scrabo from 2024. A really nice little essay about Gina Lollobrigida and Woman of Straw by Kat Ellinger. It's a video essay, and it really hits hard. And it talks about class in this movie and the way class is perceived in the film. Men of Props, an interview with the prop man Dickie Bamber from 2024, and a photo gallery. This one I liked a lot more than I thought I would. It's a very old-fashioned film, even for 1964. It feels more like an early 1950s kind of crime melodrama, but it really works. Ralph Richardson is crazy good in this film, playing the old guy who softens as his relationship blossoms with the Gina Lollobrigida character. He is incredible in this movie. Connery is chilling, and Gina Lollobrigida does a good job as well as the nurse Maria. And the interesting thing about it is that Richardson and Connery didn't get on with Gina Lollobrigida. They saw her as a diva when they were making this film, which is filmed in England and partly in Mallorca as well. That kind of antagonism between the real-life actors works in favour of the story. And like I said, it's an old-fashioned film for 1964, but it still works. The crime melodrama and the resolution to the plot, which is all there on the screen, and it's just a matter of putting the pieces together. And some secondary characters played by Johnny Secker and another black African actor have a really important part to play in the resolution of the plot. And I like that their characters are given some agency and some dignity, even though they're not treated in a dignified manner by Ralph Richardson's character, or for that matter Connery's. Interesting little obscure gem, which is really worth checking out if you haven't. I know it came out on VHS here in Australia, but it hasn't had another release here since then. You might want to get that one because it's worth having, and Ralph Richardson is superb. This is one I didn't know anything about because I don't think it's ever had a physical media release here in Australia before. And if it has, it's a very, very obscure one. It's what they used to call a woman's film, though that's not really a useful term in any meaningful way. And it's set in and around the Forza d'Agro in Sicily, a little mountain village with a fort. And it's a little piece of drama, melodrama, comedy. It goes through a number of different iterations in this one, called Jessica, starring Marie Chevalier and Angie Dickinson. And Angie Dickinson is really good in this. And Chevalier is doing that jocular older Frenchman thing he did in movies like Gigi. It's a weird little film, and it's got a good supporting cast in it as well. There's an older French actor called Noel who plays a dying gardener in this one. He's really interesting. And people like Gabriele Fazzetti, who played the father-in-law of James Bond in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Marcel Dalio, another character actor with an incredibly wide-ranging career. And also Silva Kashina, a Croatian actress, playing one of the wives of the village. But the grooviest part is the matriarch of this little village is played by Agnes Moorehead, Endora from Bewitched. And Agnes Moorehead gives a beautiful little acting role as this ostensibly cold matriarch who turns out to have more warmth than she's given credit for. This is a strange film. Right from the start, the priest of the village, played by Maurice Chevalier, talks directly to the camera. He breaks the fourth wall straight away and talks to the camera. He sings a couple of little songs in the movie about Jessica and about her little motorcycle. She rides a Vespa around the village, mostly because she is the local midwife. She's the new midwife in this little town, and she goes around and helps all the women have their babies and that kind of thing. But the whole village is turned upside down because every man in the village wants a piece of her, of Jessica, who's a young widow. Her husband died in a car accident on their wedding night, and she's moved on with a career as a midwife. She's a nurse. She's very, very good at her job. She's empathetic with people. She really is not angelic, but she's patient, she listens, and she does her job incredibly well. The problem is every man in the village wants a piece of her. The male gaze is on this village like a heavy fog. All the women in the village blame her rather than blaming the fact that their men are basically pigs. And the reason I'm saying that is most of the women in the village are pretty good looking. All of these wives are eminently tuppable. Angie Dickinson is not the only beautiful woman in the village, which is kind of crazy. But all of the men, the baker can't bake his bread properly. Everybody else is neglecting their work. And their wives get upset, and they decide to do a Lysistrata and go on a sex strike with their husbands, which is kind of funny because there are a few scabs in that strike. And that part works well. But this is a real obscurity. It was directed by Jean Negulesco, who directed a whole bunch of women's films in the 40s, 50s, and into the 60s, as this one shows, because it's from 1962. It's beautifully shot in Sicily. It's a landscape you cannot shoot badly. And the movie's fun. It's got a whole bunch of tonal things where part of it plays like a fish out of water American comedy drama. Part of it plays slightly like a musical because Maurice Chevalier is singing. Part of it is more like the Commedia all'Italiana movies of the 1960s. And part of it's got a little bit of Fellini in it. So it's a really weird tonal combination in this. And this is a really, really good release of it. You've got that artwork, which I love. Very 1960s artwork with Jessica on her Vespa. On the back, there's Angie Dickinson as a character. And I love the interior artwork that is under the slip cover. That I like because it's very much in the style of a whole bunch of Italian movie posters of the 1960s, and I really love that style of poster. Now, the extras on this, you got 1080p high def from a 2K scan, audio commentary by screenwriter, film historian C. Courtney Joyner. There's an interview with Angie Dickinson about her career from about 20 years ago called Angie Dickinson Looking Back. Inside, you got the disc and a picture of Angie Dickinson on her little Vespa. Like I said, it's an obscure film, but it's a lot of fun. And there are enough interesting actors in this to make it really land. And Angie Dickinson's character, who ultimately has an attraction to the local Marchese, played by Gabriele Fazzetti, has a lot of agency. This is an early feminist film, which is kind of interesting in this one. But all credit to Imprint for finding the damn thing and giving it a bit of respect. But you should check that one out if you haven't. It's not the sort of thing that blokey blokes are going to want to see. But this blokey bloke enjoyed the hell out of it. The third one I have for you is a Roger Moore movie, which is halfway between him playing the Saint on television and him playing James Bond, just before he played Lord Brett Sinclair in The Persuaders. He did a little kind of Euro spy movie set in London called Crossplot, which stars Roger Moore, Martha Hyer, Alexis Canner and Claudia Lang. And in this one, Roger Moore plays an advertising executive called Gary Ken, who gets involved with an international plot to overthrow the governments of all of the major powers so that a new fascist regime can take over. It's made in 1969, so it's very much swinging 60s, but it's got that vibe of the swinging 60s seen through the lens of older men, which is something that a few movies tried. In the 60s, there was a movie called Hammerhead with Vince Edwards that did the same thing. This one, directed by Alvin Rakoff, is a weird little movie. It's kind of like an updated version of the 39 Steps, or one of those other John Buchan kind of things, where Gary gets involved with this plot. He's secretly given a picture of a young woman that he needs to use for an advertising campaign. He's got to find her, not knowing that there will be people following him who want to kill her because she found out about this plot to assassinate an African leader and foment anarchy in the UK and also in America and other places around the world by this international gang of rich white people who want to run things. But basically what it is a chase kind of movie where he's wandering around London mugging outrageously. Beautiful women everywhere, including Veronica Carlson right at the start of the film. He gets chased by a whole bunch of bad guys. One of the villains is played by Francis Matthews, a very well-known English character actor of the time. One of the bad guys is played by his future boss, Bernard Lee, the guy who played M in the James Bond films up to a certain point. He's one of the bad guys in this, which is kind of foreshadowing a little bit. But it looks good in parts. There's a lot of location shooting in and around London, which looked really, really groovy. And there's some locations that I find really interesting. One of the problems with the movie is there's a whole bunch of really bad rear projection work done, where the rear projection stuff must have been filmed on a different film stock, or it's slightly out of focus or something like that. But when they use it for chase sequences and other things in the movie, it's really, really bad. This is a bit of a frothy light, not to be taken too seriously. Roger Moore in that in-between part of his career just earning a buck. It's really interesting that Imprint have put this one out. Now, there's your cover. And by the way, the title sequence is incredibly psychedelic looking and is very, very groovy. So there's your cover of the slipcover, which is a very 1960s look. There's the back, and I'm going to give you the extras in a moment. There's the interior artwork, which again has that 1960s grooviness about it. There's the back with all of the deets on it, which I'll give you in a sec. Inside, we've got Roger Moore with all of the ladies, and that's the way Roger Moore dresses all the way through the movie, that kind of 1960s aging Lothario grooviness. And the disc. Let me get my fingers out of the way. And the disc. But there's another edition as well, which is very similar to the one that was in Woman of Straw. And this one is an exhibitor's campaign book, which has all of that information like the other one, to help with the local exhibition of the films. All of the cross-promotional opportunities for Remington razors and wedding dresses and milk and Alfa Romeo cars, a lot of that kind of stuff in there. Yeah, like I said, this one's light. It's enjoyable. And if you're into Euro spy movies, which is the kind of spy movies that came out that aren't James Bond films in the 60s and 70s, you're going to want to have a copy of Crossplot, because it does fill a gap in that kind of a collection. I've got a lot of Euro spy movies. And I was kind of glad to get this one, even though it's not a tremendously good example of that subgenre. It's still entertaining. A lot of special features. 1080p high-def restoration from a new 2K scan, which Imprint did themselves. Audio commentary by Roger Moore biographer and talent agent Gareth Owen and film historian Henry Holland from 2024. Bond Practice, an interview with the director Alvin Rakoff from 2024. He's still around. Off the Charts, interview featurette with actors Norman Eshley, Michael Culver, Prudence Drago and Stephen Garlick from 2024. Dressing Down, an audio recollection by actor Francis Matthews from 2010. The New Look 60s London, Paternoster Square and London Wall, a personal view by Jonathan Wood from 2024. Restoring Crossplot featurette from 2024. You get the titles without the text, so you get all of the groovy images of the titles, theatrical trailer restored, photo gallery, and a miniature reproduction of the film's original press book. A lot of information on this one, and again, it's treated with a lot of respect. You should check that one out, particularly if you're a Roger Moore fan. This is the one I haven't watched yet. I tried to watch everything, but I just ran out of time. 1967, Franco Zeffirelli's version of The Taming of the Shrew, with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. Beautifully sumptuous looking film. The back will tell you that as much as anything. Basically what this film is it's Kiss Me Kate without the music. A Shakespeare adaptation, of course. Beautifully sumptuous. Burton and Taylor were the big star married couple of the time. The paparazzi followed every single thing they did publicly. Journalists were all over it. There was a feeding frenzy about these two right from 1964 until they finally broke up in the late 70s, I think it was, or early 80s. I know that Burton died around 1984. But I like a good Shakespeare adaptation, and these two know what they're doing, particularly Burton. He did any number of Shakespeare works on the stage in the 50s. There's some really nice artwork. The interior artwork that we've got on the actual cover is that. The back's fairly prosaic. Inside, we have Taming of the Shrew, the disc, and the couple at a feast, which, the costumes alone and the location shooting is beautiful on this film. I remember that from the previous time I saw it. I might have seen it on VHS back in the day. As far as extras are concerned, you don't have any apart from a theatrical trailer, but it's Shakespeare, it's Burton and Taylor. It's Franco Zeffirelli. It looks good. Supporting cast is interesting too. Cyril Cusack's in there, Michael Hordern, Alfred Lynch, Victor Spinetti, Michael York, Natasha Pine. Yeah, you could double feature that with Kiss Me Kate if you wanted to and just have a good time with it. The Taming of the Shrew. I think this may be the first Shakespeare, actually it's the second Shakespeare adaptation that I remember from Imprint. First one being last month with Men of Distinction, which is an adaptation of Macbeth. So maybe we're getting a little bit of a Shakespeare adaptation thing from Imprint at the moment. But I'm glad I got that in the collection now. A lot of fun. This is maybe the weirdest of the group. A 1960s movie about junkies, which was filmed in a rehab facility on Santa Monica Beach, which was a real thing in 1960s Los Angeles, a place called Synanon, which took an unusual approach to rehabilitating people with drug addiction problems. And I'll talk more about that in a moment because it's a wild story. This one was directed by Richard Quine, who did a whole bunch of movies, including one I really like called Paris When It Sizzled. It's from 1965 and it's got a great cast. Stars Edmund O'Brien as the actual guy who ran Synanon in real life, Chuck Connors as a recovering junkie, Stella Stevens and Alex Cord as the couple who fall in love, both of whom are drug addicts, Richard Conte, Ursa Kitt's in here as well, and it's filmed in beautiful black and white, and it is strident and it's over the top, and it takes a singular approach to the problem of drug addiction. Now, I'll tell you about Synanon, and the first thing I'll tell you is it became a cult. It was always a cult. An organisation which eventually became a cult, and it did things like putting rattlesnakes into the letterboxes of its enemies and making a hierarchical thing and separating people from their families and all sorts of stuff. And all of it's in here because they filmed it with some real recovering drug addicts. They call them dope fiends in the movie. That's the kind of attitude they take. And the approach that Synanon took to recovering people with addictions is what they call attack therapy, where you attack everything about the person. You insult them, you criticize them, you mock them, you're satirical to them. You do all of this stuff as a way of breaking them down so you can build them back up. They had like extreme haircuts as a punishment, and you see that with Alex Cord's character, who is forced to shave off his mustache and get a haircut because they want him to look that way. And they have these therapy sessions where basically everybody attacks you and attacks who you are. So you eventually break down and confess everything. And there's an assumption that people are not suffering from a medical illness the way that we know drug addiction is, but have moral character failings. It doesn't take into account the possibility of somebody being abused as a child or abused as an adult. It doesn't take any of the reasons why people become drug addicts into consideration. And they've actually done studies since then about attack therapy. And the thing they found out that is if you have a strong self-image, if you regard yourself kindly and you have a strong self-image as far as liking yourself, it can work for you under certain circumstances. But if you don't, it will destroy you. And that's what Synanon did. I know this is going a bit long, but I'm really interested in this kind of thing. So in the movie, we've got Alex Cord's character, who has a really unusual name. Let me find the guy's name. His character's name is Zanky Albo, which is funny because the Australian Prime Minister's nickname is Albo. And they mock him for his name when they're doing these therapy sessions. And every character in this bullies him, when basically what he needs to do is be supported while he goes through this thing. The Synanon thing does cold turkey. There's no kind of medication or anything to ease people through their trail from addiction. It's painful to watch in some ways. Yeah, there's bullying, there's gaslighting, there's all this kind of stuff. And Zanky and the character played by Stella Stevens form a relationship. They're attracted to each other. And the people at Synanon decide that that's an alternative to drugs. They're not falling in love. They're just changing one addiction for another. And it made me want to kick the shit out of all the people in this movie. It really cheesed me off. It's a strong drama, and it's interesting this showing the cluelessness of certain people at the time towards certain issues, which we now hopefully take a more compassionate approach to. Synanon is so over the top strident. It's an artifact of its time, which is really fascinating because of that. So there's your slipcover. There aren't any extras on this apart from a theatrical trailer, but there's the back of it. Inside, you got that. And Stella Stevens is really good in it. Alex Cord's good, even though Alex Cord is a kind of actor who can hit and miss at various times depending on the particular role he's in. I'm trying to get that to focus there. There's your back cover, which again reiterates what's on the slipcover. There's the bit where they're giving him the almost involuntary haircut. And there's the disc itself. This movie could be considered a cult movie in some ways. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here that maybe want somebody to do something like a MST3K thing, Mystery Science Theater approach to it, and mock the hell out of the movie. But there's some good scenes with Ursa Kitt and Richard Conte and other character actors like that. This one left a bad taste in my mouth because the whole Synanon thing is so deeply embedded in cruelty. And the guy that Edmund O'Brien plays in the movie became a megalomaniacal monster who eventually spent time in jail before he died in the 1980s. It's an interesting piece of American social history, and for that reason I found it really interesting. Interesting thing is Zanky's got a friend who's got a rich family, but he's a junkie, and there's an interesting subtext there where his friend is probably in love with Zanky, and as things progress in the movie gets quite tragic at the end. There's some interesting nuances to that. Stella Stevens is really good. Everybody's really good in this movie, but the premise underlying it is pretty bloody monstrous. You might want to get Synanon. It's a rarity in 1960s cinema. Really interesting for that. And the more you dive into the history of the real life Synanon, which supported them filming on location in their building, the more this movie becomes a complex thing to watch. Just notice we've got the sunshine coming. Just notice we've got the sunshine coming in here, and eventually it's going to come over my face. So I better get this video finished before you get blasted by light. Last movie I've got for you before I do the TV series, which is a banger, is my favourite sporting movie of all time. I've actually got the pan and scan version of this that came out on DVD about 8 or 10 years ago. But it's 1960s Hollywood, Universal Pictures B-movie, soap opera sleaze, and I love it. It's a movie called Banning, starring Robert Wagner, Anjanette Comer, Jill St. John, Guy Stockwell, James Farentino, Sean Garrison, and a small role by Gene Hackman before he became famous with The French Connection a few years later. And Gene Hackman's character in this is really interesting. It's about a golf pro called Mike Banning, played by Robert Wagner, who's been chucked out of the PGA for match fixing, which he didn't actually do. And he goes to an expensive country club in Arizona, where the guy who set him up for the match fixing, played by Guy Stockwell, is running things along with his father-in-law. He's married to a beautiful woman played by Susan Clark, who is very much a daddy's girl. He meets one of the social organisers for this expensive country club, a woman called Carol, played by Anjanette Comer, and they have an attraction to each other. But both of them have an interesting backstory as well. Banning has an urgent need to get a lot of money fast, not for himself, but for somebody who helped him in his career, a dentist, played by Logan Ramsay, and there's a gangster played by Mike Kellen who is in town to get the money, and he suggests that they do a certain kind of golf tournament called Calcutta, which can make the money really fast. It's a really wild film. The music's by Quincy Jones, and it is superb. It's, I think, the first movie that Quincy Jones did the soundtrack for. And in fact, the title song, The Eyes of Love, got nominated for an Oscar at the time. It's the only thing in this that got nominated for an Oscar. But it's got beautiful golf scenes. It's got beautiful women, all of whom are horny as hell. It's got sleazy guys. It's got golf tournaments. And it's a lot of fun. I really like this movie. And there are a bunch of extras in this, which I really appreciate. So there's your front cover. I've actually got this not only as a one sheet, but as an Australian daybill poster. I've got both posters of this. There's the back cover. The box itself's got this, which I really love the look of that one. That's a really great cover there. And the back of it's got that. Inside you've got a lot of the main players there. And the disc itself. This is the first time I've seen this movie in widescreen. I saw it on TV back in the day and I liked it. And I got the original DVD one, but I've never seen it on widescreen until now because it hasn't been released on widescreen on physical media until now. It's just 1960s sleazy soap opera. There's some cool dialogue. You've got that kind of laconic vocal fry of Robert Wagner in there. You might want to look up what vocal fry is if you don't know, because it's an interesting phenomenon about the way people speak. Now, the special features 1080p from a new 2K scan by Imprint. Thank you, Imprint. Audio commentary by film historians Howard S. Berger and Steve Mitchell. A hole-in-one, Robert Wagner and Jules St. John remember batting from 2024. They actually do a Skype call with Wagner and St. John, who are married now, in 2024, talking about the movie and talking about their careers. And they both still got their marbles, even though they are in their 80s and 90s. And they've got a certain wisdom about their careers, which I find kind of interesting as well. Members only, scoring banning, an interview with author, film, music historian John Burlingame on Quincy Jones's score from 2024, and that's a really good addition. It really gives us the background of Quincy Jones's music in this movie and how it's used particularly well during a lot of the action scenes. There's an isolated music track of the Quincy Jones score, fantastic, and a theatrical trailer. When I heard this one was coming out, I nearly chucked backflips because it's one of those movies that isn't innately wonderful, but I really like it. It's just grabbed me. And I've actually watched it again earlier this year before I found out this was coming out. That's how much I liked it. So when I tried to put it onto my Letterboxd list, it wouldn't do it again because it had already been watched this year. Recommend that one. Groovy 1960s stuff. And I'll give you a little bit of trivia, which the commentary track missed. There's a scene in the country club in this movie where there is dancing and there's a guy playing piano. The guy playing piano in that is Bobby Troop, the guy who wrote the song Route 66 and who was married to Julie London. He's in the background playing the music there. So there's a little bit of extra for you that isn't in the commentary track. You should get that one, particularly if you like 1960s movies. Groovy stuff. Last but not least, we've got an English supernatural detective series from the 1960s, which I liked a lot at the time. And I watched the first episode of it this morning because my internet was down. There's some problems with the National Broadband Network at the moment, which I'm going to have to address to get this video uploaded. But I watched the first episode of Randall and Hopkirk Deceased, and here's the full series. Stars Mike Pratt, Kenneth Cope, and Annette Andre. Basically, it's about a couple of private eyes working in London who do some divorce work, amongst other things. And they get involved with getting some evidence for a wealthy woman about her husband's infidelities. Her husband's played by Frank Windsor. He has her murdered. And because they're investigating and they realise that there's a sneaky way in which she was murdered in a bathtub, Marty Hopkirk, played by Kenneth Cope, gets run down by the assassination squad this guy's hired to kill his wife. But he comes back as a ghost. You can tell he's a ghost because he's wearing white. Now, his partner, played by Mike Pratt, is devastated, obviously. His best friend's been killed. And his best friend's wife's played by Annette Andre, the Australian actress standing in the middle there. Marty comes back as a ghost, but only Jeff can see him. And Marty's still learning how to be a ghost, which is quite fun. There's a weird combination of drama, action, and comedy in this one. Now, one of the problems some people have with it is, all through the series, Kenneth Cope wears a really obvious toupee, which you can't really see in this picture, but it's there. But it's got the right tone. It was produced and written by some great people who'd done a lot of action series in the 60s. People like Dennis Spooner. It was produced by Monty Berman. It's got that night, and my face is getting into the sunshine here. Let me just twist this around a bit. That's as good as it's going to get. So sorry if there's some light coming up from beneath, which is unflattering. You get 3 discs. There's one with Mike Pratt in there. Good character actor. 2. See what I mean about the wig? And 3. Plus you get this groovy book with all the information. This groovy book with all the information about the series, which has a lot of extras in it. Won't show you everything, but there is that story information and other stuff, and of course the sunlight's getting on it. It's a rotten time of day to do this. If you hear moaning in the background, that's Luna crying out. So what you got is a 1080p high-def presentation of the original 35mm elements, and it looks good. I watched the first episode, and one of the villains in the first episode is played by Ronald Lacey, who played the Nazi Tot in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Option to view episode 3 with alternative opening title sequence. A whole bunch of stuff there. What we've got is The Ghost Talks, interview with Kenneth Cope, A Sentimental Journey, an interview with Annette Andre, Be My Guest, an interview with the guest actor Jane Merrow, Randall and Hopkirk Revisited, making of documentary narrated by Ian Ogilvy, Mike Pratt Remembered, a featurette. He died a number of years ago, but his son is part of the remembrance of Mike Pratt. New Genie's Fashion, a look at the wardrobe and fashions of the series with Annette Andre. Whoever heard of a definitive episode order, and look at the series broadcast anomalies. New titles by The Story of Chamber and Partners, a video essay about the company who created ITC's graphic and title design. A new high-definition apparitions restoration featurette from the 2017 restoration. The Man in Room 17, How to Rob a Bank and Get Away with It, a complete episode guest starring Mike Pratt of the series The Man in Room 17. Edgar Wallace Mysteries, Change Partners, a complete film starring Kenneth Cope. So you got a lot of extras on there that aren't directly related to the TV series. An episode of Gideon's Way, The Nightlife, is a complete episode guest starring Annette Andre. Production footage, textless titles, UK break bumpers, extensive photo galleries for each episode, with incidental music from the series by Edwin Astley, memorabilia gallery, ITC home video trailer, and more, and the 120-page perfect bound booklet featuring essay by television writer and historian Andrew Pixley, and press story information from the original studio files. There is a ton of stuff in this, and if you flip the cover around and take off the back card, there's the alternative title for the series, which I think may be the title they used in the USA. Great box set, and Imprint's doing this. They're putting out some really groovy stuff of particularly obscure 1960s cult TV series. They're not that obscure, but they're doing a lot of this each month, and they're bringing it out. And I remember when a kid, we used to call this Randall and Hopkirk disease, because kids were incredibly witty in my day. Lovely little box set, and when I showed it on my Facebook, a lot of people went, I love that series, and indeed they do, and you should check it out if you ever get to see it without light shining wrong on it. So that's all the stuff I got this month from Imprint. There's 6 movies, quirky 1960s stuff, a quirky 1960s TV series, and so many deep cuts there, and there were movies there that I didn't know about, and there's one movie that I positively love. And I'm going to go away now because the light is shining really weirdly onto my face as I record this. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Let me know which of these you like and which ones you're intrigued by as well, because normally when I do these kind of a haul, there's always a couple of movies that people go, I'd really like that, and I saw that one when I was a kid. So let me know your stories about these movies. You can also support the channel by becoming a channel member, or else by becoming a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Next up, we've got the Wednesday video, and I'm going to try to find something very different from that. And then we get back to science fiction Saturday, and the circle goes around again. thank you, by the way, to Imprint for giving me these review copies of these movies and the TV series. They're doing some wonderful stuff, and they've got some upcoming stuff, including 4Ks they're putting out in December, which are going to really hit big for audiences. There's an Australian one. There's a war film with an enormous cast. There's a childhood favourite of a lot of people who grew up in the 80s. And there's even a Sam Peckinpah movie in 4K that's coming out in December. So all of that stuff is really interesting and is on its way. So until next time, when I'm going to be watching a few less movies than this, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Check out Batting, I love it. And I'll catch you next time.